Hello and welcome to my channel. Welcome to Nicole's Crafty Corner. I am Nicole. Some of you know me as Sheekorganics. If you've been following my crochet journey for the past, I don't know how many years, then you'll know my company as Sheekorganics. My actual real name is Nicole. My good friends call me Rashika, so there's a whole lot going on. I'm all those people. So if you're wondering if all those people are me, it is. I'm her. But I wanted to make this video. I wanted to make more of a comprehensive how to crochet for like absolute beginners. I started crocheting 38 years ago when I was 11, and I was taught by a lady, Miss Hollins, who is 93. I love her so much. And you know, there was no YouTube back then. There was no books. She taught me off some really old crochet hooks and some really old yarn that she had, but she taught me how to crochet correctly. And so I want to infuse some of the things that she taught me, as well as some of the things that I've learned from other YouTubers, to make a how-to crochet video for absolute beginners. So what we will be going over in this video is we will be going over materials such as your yarn, your hook, stitch markers, yarn needles, all the things you need to actually get started on your project. I'll be teaching you basic stitches, and all the stitches that I'll be teaching you in this video, if you know how to make these stitches, then you'll know how to make anything on my page for now. I did that purposely. When I started this video, I wanted to make projects that were easy initially and then build up to making more intermediate, advanced projects. So all the stitches I'm going to teach you today are all the basic stitches of crochet, and you'll be able to make anything on my channel when you learn these stitches. Also, I'll be showing you abbreviations at the same time because it's important to know the language of crochet, especially if you're going to get into either pattern reading or pattern writing. Sometimes it's great to just, once you've been crocheting for a while, sometimes you just want the pattern and you don't necessarily need a full tutorial. Sometimes it's best to have both. So I'd like to teach you abbreviations. I'll also be teaching you about stitch anatomy. I think when you know what the stitch is comprised of, it's easier to figure out what you're doing, and there's less guesswork when you actually know what the stitch is supposed to look like and where your hook is supposed to go. I'll show you a little bit about reading labels, and also I will show you about swatches and gauges, which is really important when you're crocheting because everyone crochets with a different tension. My tension, because I've been crocheting for so long, I'm very good at regulating my tension, at making it looser or tighter whenever I need to. But when you first start out, it can be very hard to try to control your tension. But if you have swatches and gauges, then that will tell you, I won't get into too much of it now, but swatches and gauges will tell you if you're crocheting tight or loose enough for the project that you're working on. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel and on my journey, and I look forward to sharing all of my creations with you. Let's get started. Okay, let's talk about materials. For this tutorial, I am going to be using two different kinds of yarn. I'll be using an acrylic yarn, and then I'll also be using a cotton yarn. I'll be using the cotton yarn for the first part of the tutorial and the acrylic yarn for the second part of the tutorial. It doesn't matter. I just think that you should get used to working with both. I'll be using two different size hooks. I'll be using a 5.0 millimeter, which is also known as an H hook. And then I'll also be using a 5.5, which is an I hook. I'll be using a tape measure, and this is so that we can measure our swatches at the end of each tutorial. You'll be needing a yarn needle, and this is so that you can weave your ends in at the end. You'll be needing stitch markers. You can either use locking stitch markers, which you can get like 50 on Amazon for $5. Bobby pins are my favorite stitch marker because it's long, they slide down, they're skinny, and they just work perfectly for stitch markers. You don't have to worry about them coming unlocked or falling out because they're so long. So If you don't want to invest in stitch markers, you don't have to. You can just use a bobby pin. And then you'll need scissors, just standard scissors for cutting things. So when you start crocheting, you want to start with yarn that is easy to work with. You don't want to already start off with difficult yarn. And when I say difficult, I mean texture and color. So you want to start off with a lighter colored yarn because you'll want to be able to see your stitches. If you start off with black, dark blue, dark greens, it'll be so much harder for you to see what you're doing. And in the beginning, it's very important for you to be able to see your stitches. So I would start with a lighter colored yarn. I would start also with a medium weighted yarn, so it's not too thick, it's not too thin. Medium weight is right here where it says medium, number 4. And number 4s come in different materials. This is acrylic, this is cotton, but again, it's a number 4. That's, I feel like, is the easiest material to work with when you first start. So when you're learning, a medium weight is good. The label will show you what size hook is recommended for the size yarn. So in this cotton yarn, it says it's recommended that I use a 5mm hook, which is this one. And it says right here, 5mm hook. That's just a recommended hook for this size. But of course, you're going to get the size hook for whatever you're making. I like to use H, and I also like to use I because these are very common hooks in beginner patterns. I'm going to be making 2 swatches. One of the swatches I'll be making with the size 9, and the other I'll be making with the size 8. So if you want to go ahead and do the whole tutorial and have your measurements mark up against mine, then get both of those hooks. You don't have to. It's not necessary. And then, of course, we'll be using this tape measure to measure your swatches to see where you are. So once you have your materials, let's get started. All right, let's get started. Let's get started with a slip knot. A slip knot is how you will get the loops, the first loop onto your hook, and it's how you will start a lot of projects, probably most of your projects. Some projects are started with a magic ring, but most projects are started with a slip knot. And this is how I make my slip knots. And this is how I teach how to make a slip knot. You want to make sure you have a long enough tail, probably at least a hand's length, because this is what you're going to weave in at the end, and you don't want it too short, and you don't want it too long either. But just it'd be too long than too short. So just a decent length, and then this is your working yarn. The working yarn is the yarn that's attached to your ball. So if you ever hear that, the working yarn is the long piece that's attached to the yarn ball. You want to take the short end to the left and have the long working yarn to your right. You want to flip this over to your right. So now you have a loop there. You're going to go under this loop and pull this up. So you're going to go under. You can go under with 2 fingers, and then you're just going to pull up this working yarn. And that's a slip knot. And how you know it's a slip knot is that it'll slip right on out. Just like that. Let's do it again. So you're having the short piece to the left, the working piece to your right. You're going to flip this over to your right. So now you have a little man, and you're going to go under, and you're going to pull up this working yarn. Okay? That is a slip knot. I just wanted to note that most patterns will not tell you to do a slip knot. It'll usually tell you how many chains to start off with. So the pattern may say start with a chain 10. A slip knot is just understood. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our hook in. I'm going to pull it. You don't want it too tight. You want to be able to do this. If it's too tight, it's going to be way too hard for you to crochet into. So you want to pull it taut. You want it to be on there. You don't want it too loose either, but you definitely want to be able to move your hook back and forth. So let's talk about how to hold your hook. There's basically 2 ways to hold your hook. There's a knife, and as you can see, it's pretty self-explanatory, where you have a finger on here and you have your thumb on, usually there's a thumb rest, and you crochet like that. Okay. And then there's the pencil. This is how I tend to hold my hook for most things. I will switch to a knife if I'm working with something that's thicker, or if I'm working with 2 strands of yarn and I feel like I need more strength, then I will use a knife. Most people I know actually use a knife. They don't actually use the pencil grip, but this is how I was taught. And so this is how I hold mine. No way is right or wrong. Don't let anybody tell you that there's a right or a wrong way to hold your hook. The right way to hold your hook is a way that gets the stitches done correctly. That is the right way. And then there's also how you're holding the working yarn. Right now, we're done with this tail. This is now your working yarn, the yarn that's attached to the ball. So there's some people who hold their yarn and then they have this part up. Some people wrap it around twice because then they can control their tension a little bit better. I don't. For me, and it's because I've been crocheting for so long, and you'll find your own way. I put all of the yarn in my hand and I control my tension with how much I squeeze or let go on this yarn, how much I pull up. So you're going to grab your yarn however it feels comfortable. It's going to change. When you start crocheting, it's going to feel very awkward. It's going to. Don't worry about it. It's a whole new skill. It's an art form. And so be patient with yourself. I hold all of this yarn with one hand, and I just control my tension with my thumb, my index finger, and the rest of my fingers here. If it helps you to hold your yarn up, do that. If it helps you to wrap around twice so that you can control your tension, do that. So also, the reason you have this long hook here is to make sure that your stitches are even all the way around. If you only crochet right here, and some of you will do it, you're gonna do this, then you're gonna wonder why you're having such a hard time getting your hook inside of your stitches, and why you're having such a hard time making things look even. It's because you're not making sure that this comes all the way down when you're crocheting. And I'll show you an example of that. We're going to start with a chain. We're going to chain up 16 eventually. Right now, we'll just do a few just so I can show you how to work a chain. So how you work a chain is you wrap around, you use your index finger and your thumb to hold this. This is how you're going to control your loops. Okay, and this is how you control your actual working yarn, your crochet. What you're doing is you're wrapping this around. You can use your hook, you can use your hand at first, and you're going to use your thumb and your index finger to pull this loop, have some tension, and then you're going to pull that through the loop. Okay, notice I'm holding this. A lot of times when people start crocheting, they want to hold here. They don't want to hold this at all. And they're spinning. Some of y'all are spinning right now. I know you are. You're spinning because you're not holding this. It's a lot going on, but you got it. If I can learn it, you can learn it. Okay, let's do it again. We're going to wrap around. I'm going to hold this and I'm going to pull this loop through. Okay, let's do it again. We're wrapping around. We're holding, we're making sure we get all of this neck. We want that. Pull that through. We're going to wrap around. If I don't pull this all the way down and I try to crochet just from here, it's not going to, first of all, it's going to be hard for me to get through there. And then my stitches aren't going to be even because now, instead of them all being this size, you have some that are this size. So if you're looking at your work and you're noticing that some of your stitches are small and some are bigger, it's because you're new, but it's also because you might not be sliding that yarn all the way down the neck of this crochet hook to make sure they all get this. This is the 5.0, the 5.5, sorry, the 5.5. This is it right here. It's not this, it's not this, it's this. This is what you want for consistency. So again, make sure you pull this all the way down, wrap around, pull this all the way through. Okay, you might want to spend some time on the chain, okay? You might, because it's important to have your chain be consistent, because it's the foundation of your work. It's what everything else is built upon. And so how Miss Hollins taught me was she gave me a whole skein of yarn, which is what this is. Some people say skein, it is skein. Argue with somebody else. And she made me do all chains. She made me do a whole skein of yarn of just chains. And then when I would come back to see her, she would check every single chain. And if one was out, she would take the whole thing apart. I'm not asking you to do that. But will it make you a better crocheter if you do? Yep. I'll give you a much better task, an easier task than that. So let's work on our chains for now. That's 2. We're going to do 3. Again, we're wrapping around. We're holding here so we have control over this loop. We're going to go through. Okay? Let's wrap around, go through, wrap around. Okay, let's talk about the anatomy of your chain. So as you can see here, I have some chains made here. Let's see how many I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 chains. So what makes up a chain are these V stitches right here. They look like little V's, right? And if you've crocheted correctly, it'll be flat on one side and it'll have bumps on the other. If it looks like this and you got some of both going on, that's totally normal. It's because you're new. But just for reference, you should have the V's on one and the bumps on the other. Some patterns call for you to do a chain and then they want you to crochet into these back bumps. These are the back bumps, okay? Some patterns call for it. Most of mine will not. Also, with these loops, there's a front loop and a back loop, a front loop and a back loop. And this is all about perspective. If I turn my work, which I will do, then now this is my front loop, which is the loop closest to me, and this is my back loop, okay? So there are projects on my page where I'm asking you to work in the back loop only, and just make sure you know that that back loop is the loop that's furthest from you. So you have this loop and you have the front loop, and then if you turn in the back, you have these bumps, okay? It's important. It's important to know because some patterns will call for you to work in the front loop, in the back loop, in the back bump, and you should know what that means. So what we're going to do is I have 7, we're going to chain up 16. So again, we're going to wrap around, grab here, make sure we're down here, pull through, wrap around, pull through, wrap around, pull through, wrap around, pull through, wrap around, pull through. See how many we have. 14, 15, 16. So now we have 16 chains. So how you count chains, because sometimes when you're reading a pattern, you're like, I don't even know where to start. This loop on your hook doesn't count. It's a loop on your hook. So if they say go into the first chain, it's not this, it is this. So we're not counting the loop. First chain, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay? This is what 16 chains should look like. The first stitch that we are going to learn is a single crochet. And I will show you how that is worked. What we're going to do for a single crochet is we're not going to go into this loop. We're going to go into the second loop from the hook. Again, this is the first loop, This is the second loop. We're going to go into the second loop from the hook. I'm going to go under this loop here, under that top loop. I'm going to pull up the working yarn. So now you have 2 loops on your hook. And again, you want to slide. It'll become more naturally to you later, but you want to make sure, this is how you make sure that all of your stitches are even. And so you have 2 loops on your hook. You want to yarn over and go pull through both loops. Okay? So now you have 1 single crochet into that second loop. And the way you can tell is you can see the stitches coming out of there. And so the top of the single crochet has 2 loops. As you can see there, it has a front loop and a back loop. What I'm going to do is I am going to mark this first stitch so that you know where your first stitch is. There won't be any guessing work. You won't have to go back and recount it and recount it. I'm a huge fan of stitch markers. There is no shame in using stitch markers. It doesn't mean anything. If you don't need them, if you need them, go under both loops when you are marking your stitch. If you only go under one, when it comes time to slip stitch or whatever you need to do in there, you're going under only one, and that's not giving you a good foundation. So put this stitch marker under both loops. Now you know this is your first stitch. It won't be anything else. It won't be under here. It won't be anywhere else. This is your first stitch. Okay, let's go back in here. So we want to do single crochets all the way across. And we should have 15 single crochets at the end of the row because we didn't crochet into that first stitch. Remember, we crocheted into the second one. So let's continue. The next stitch, although it looks like it could be here, there's already a stitch worked in here. This right here is your next stitch. You want to go under that top loop. You're going to pull up this working yarn. Notice my finger, my index finger and my thumb are always here to control the situation. You want to yarn over, go through both loops. So now, as you can see, I have 2 single crochet into this chain. Okay, so we're going to continue making single crochets all the way across. Going under this next loop here, we're going to pull up this working yarn. Now we have 2 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over, grab here, pull through. This is important. The grab, super important. If you don't grab, your yarn is going to be doing the twist. Oh, I'm aging myself, not the twist. Okay, next, under there, pulling up this loop, yarn over, go through both loops. And again, experiment with how you want to hold your hook and how you want to hold your yarn. You can see how I hold mine. I use my pinky and this little finger. What's this little finger? The little ring finger. Control a lot of my tension. I know I've seen a lot of crochet videos with the finger up in the air. I've tried that and I had some major cramps. So I'm like, well, I'm not, if it ain't broke, I'm not going to fix it. So you all, there is no right or wrong way. The wrong way is the way that produces ugly work and wrong stitches. Okay, we're going to go across, all the way across, and it'll take you a little bit to develop your own way of crocheting, but it's all right. Under, pulling up the working yarn, you have 2. You want to wrap around, pull through 2. Go under this loop here, pull up this working yarn, yarn over. You can use your hand to yarn over, pull it through. And this is our last one. Okay, let us count our stitches. Whenever I need to count stitches to make sure that my project is correct, I like to count not from the stitch marker, but I like to count backwards. Because a lot of times you have a lot of stuff going on over here. So it's best to start from back. So we want to count, remember, each of these V's here count as one stitch. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yay! You should also have 15. Okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to also mark the 15th stitch. And again, I'm going under both loops. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to have, you're making a swatch right now. And you're making a swatch with a few different basic stitches all on one swatch. So you have something to look at. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn our work so we can work on the next level. In order to work on this next level, you need to chain for height. So when you're working a single crochet, most of the time you will chain up 1 and then turn your work. So now you're usually 99% of the time you're working to the left. So now you've crocheted up so that now you can go straight across. If you don't make this chain right here, then your work will start to lean in like this, which some patterns call for certain rows to be like that. For the most part, it won't. You will have to chain up a certain amount in order to get the height that you need. I'm going to take this out for now. So we've chained 1. This is our chain. This is our loop. That doesn't count. We're going to be crocheting in right here into this space, this very first space. So a lot of times when people are first starting, you have this height here because of this chain and you want to go into this second space, but that's not what we're doing. Unless it tells you to go into the second, you're going into the first. Okay. And so again, if you look at the top of your first row of single crochets, you have the V stitches on top, you have the front loop, and you have the back loop. Okay. Unless it tells you front or back loop, you're going to go under both. Okay. So we've already chained 1. That's our chain 1. In order to continue making this last row of single crochets, we're going right back under here. And this is under the 2 loops. See under the 2 loops here? We're pulling up. We have the 2 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over, still using my thumb and my pointer finger, and we're going to pull through. And what I'm going to do is immediately mark my first stitch, which is right here. Again, I'm going under both loops. I'm just going to mark. I don't know if I'm going to mark. Yeah, I am. I'll keep the last stitch. So that's our first stitch. Again, when you go across, you're making sure you're going under. I know I'm being real redundant right now, but you want to make sure you're going under both loops. So our next stitch is here. Go under both loops. Pull this working yarn up. You now have 2 loops on your hook. You want to yarn over, go through both. Next stitch is here. You see where this hole is? If it helps to pull it apart, that's fine. Just make sure that you're going under both loops. So you're going to go through there. You're under both. Just spread that apart and see that. You're going to pull up this loop here. You have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over, go through both loops. The next, yarn over, pull up both. Yarn over, pull through 2. And if you notice when I pull through, I always go down. It's just automatic, and it will be for you too. And all hooks are different, so you'll figure out your way. You're going straight through, pulling up, yarn over, go through both loops. Under 2 loops, pull up, yarn over, go through. This is what your work should be looking like so far. Again, you're going under the next 2 loops. You're going to pull up this working yarn over, go through both. So go ahead and work on your single crochets going all the way across. Take your time. Take your time. Baby, we can do it. Take your time. That is an inappropriate song, isn't it? Okay. Okay. And we know that this is our last stitch. Why do we know that? Stitch marker. So I'm going to take it out. I'm going to go ahead and put my last single crochet of the row into there, yarn over, go through both. So this is what your work should be looking like. Yes. This is the front. This is the back. You'll be able to tell by looking at it. Okay? That is a single crochet. Look at you. And you can make a whole blanket, a whole hand towel, a whole scarf out of just single crochets. If you make that chain, the initial chain, as wide as you want your scarf, you can just make rows going back and forth as long as you want. And you already know how to crochet. Look at that. Look at you go. Okay, let us continue with the half double crochet. So we first worked on the single crochet, which is a pretty short stitch, short meaning short. The half double crochet is just a little bit taller. So let's work on this. I am going to still only chain up 1, even though it's a taller stitch. It's not tall enough for me to need 2 chains, in my opinion. In my opinion. Okay, but you do whatever the pattern calls for. You're going to chain up 1 for height, and then you're going to turn your work. Okay, that chain does not count as a stitch, so you do not want to put your stitch marker in that chain. Okay, how we work a half double crochet. With a single crochet, you go straight directly into the stitch. With a half double crochet, you have to yarn over first. So you want to yarn over, either yarn over with the hook or with your hand. We're going to go right under the first 2 loops. I'll show you with this. You're going under here. Again, if it helps you to look at the top of your work first before you start the row, just so you make sure you understand you're going under both of these loops. This is the front loop, this is the back loop. You're going to go under both, okay? And your first stitch you're going under is right here, okay? So, half double crochet, you want to yarn over. You want to go under those 2 loops. You're going to pull up this working yarn. Now you have 3 loops on your hook, okay? You want to yarn over and go through all 3, okay? That's a half double crochet. I'm going to go ahead and mark it. And again, when you're marking your stitches, you want to go under both loops. Okay, so we know that's our first stitch of this row. Okay, let's do another half double crochet. We're going to yarn over. We're going under this next set of loops. And again, we're under both. You can see there we're under both loops. We're going to pull up this working yarn so that now there's 3 loops on your hook. Again, we're checking our gauge. We're going to yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. Again, we're still using our pointer and our thumb to control the situation. So now I'm also using this hand to not only use my hook, but also to move this out of my way. It's a lot, y'all. It sounds like a lot. It seems like a lot, but I promise you, once you are crocheting for a couple days even, things will start to get more comfortable and it'll make more sense to you. Okay, so we're going to yarn over. We're going under the next set of loops. We're going to pull this yarn up. We have 3 loops on our hook. We're yarning over, using this to pull down, control the situation, pull all the way, all through. So if you look, this half double crochet is a taller stitch than the single crochet. The anatomy of the stitch is this is the post or the body of the stitch, okay? And this is the top loops of the stitch. So some patterns will have you crocheting around the front post. Just know that the post is the body of the stitch. Like this post is the single crochet post. This is the half double crochet. It just means the body, okay? So, but as you can see, that half double crochet is a taller stitch. We're going to yarn over, go through the next, pull up this yarn, yarn over again, pull through all 3. This is a half double crochet. Remember, you're going under both loops unless the pattern tells you otherwise. We're going to go all the way across. And again, we should still have 15 stitches at the end of this row. Yarn over, go through, pull up, yarn over, pull through all 3. Don't forget to yarn over first. Yarn over, go through the loop, pull this loop up, yarn over, go through 3. Go ahead and go all the way across. Pause the video, stop the video, whatever you have to do. Okay, and we know that we have one more stitch. Why? Because our friendly little helper here, Mr. Stitch Marker, we're going to yarn over, go under both loops here, pull this up, yarn over, go through all 3. Okay, so now we have our first row of half double crochets. Woo woo! Let's fix our lighting. Okay, so this is what our swatch should look like. Now you have 2 rows of single crochet and you have 1 row of half double crochet. Let us continue. So again, we're only chaining 1 up for height for this next row. We're going to turn our work. And now we're going to do 1 more row of half double crochets. So again, this is our chain that does not count. We're going to go into right under here. We're going to yarn over, go under here, pull up this loop, yarn over, go through all 3. Yarn over, go through the next set of loops. Again, make sure you're under both. Yarn over, go through 3. Oh, you know what we didn't do? Mark our first stitch, which is right here. Don't be like me. Mark your stitch. All right, so because we want to make sure we have 15 stitches, you'll be surprised at how quickly you can go from 16 to 15 to 14 to 13. Next thing you know, you're at the end of your project and your project is leaning because you have less stitches. So mark your stitches. We are coming up onto our last couple of stitches. We're going to remove our stitch marker so that we can do our last half double crochet into that spot. Yarn over, go through all 3, and this is what your work should be looking like so far. Okay, let us continue. Now I'm going to teach you how to do a double crochet. Ooh. What we're going to do is we're doing a turning chain for height. Remember, we're going to chain 2. So I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to chain 2. Okay, the double crochet is this height, so that's why we need to chain 2, and then we're going to turn our work. Again, because we're always working to the left for the most part. There are some other little finishing stitches that go the other way, but for the most part, you're crocheting to the left. Okay, we have 2 chains now, 2 chains, and we're going to do a double crochet. The double crochet starts off just like the half double crochet. So we're going to yarn over. We're going right into this stitch here under both. We're going to pull up the yarn just like we did with the half double. But with the half double, you yarn over, you go through all 3 stitches. With the double crochet, which is a taller stitch, we're going to yarn over. We're going to go through 2 stitches. Now we have 2 loops on your hook. We're going to yarn over and go through the last 2 stitches. That is a double crochet. And it looks like you have 2 double crochet here because of the chain 2. You do not. You really have 1 double crochet, and that's what we're going to mark. Some patterns will say that chain counts as a double crochet. Then it does. But if it doesn't say that, if it doesn't say that the chain 2 counts as a double crochet, don't treat it as such. Treat it as a chaining turn for height. Okay, so I marked my first double crochet, and let's continue. We're yarning over. We're going under the next stitch, making sure we're going under the 2. We're pulling up this working yarn so that now we have 3 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2. You see how much taller the double crochet is than the half double crochet, and twice as tall as the single crochet. Yarn over, go through the loop, pull up the working yarn, yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2. Yarn over, go through the hole. Pull up the working yarn. Remember to yarn over. Some people forget to yarn over. You have to yarn over twice. You're yarning over here to go through 2. You're yarning over again to go through 2. There's lots of yarning over with a double crochet. We're going to go all the way across. And you know by now how many you should have at the end. The stitch should not matter on your count. It shouldn't. So just because you're doing a longer stitch, a taller stitch, doesn't mean that it should change your stitch count. Okay? I am knifing it right now for the most part. I think it's easier to show you how to crochet if I hold my stitch, my hook like a knife. I might switch it up from time to time. And you might too. We are coming up to the end of our double crochet rounds. I have one more where my stitch marker is. I'm going to take it out. And I'm going to put our last stitch of the row, our last double crochet of the row. We're going to yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2. And now we have a row of double crochets. Let's count to make sure we still have 15. Remember, I like to count from the back going forward because we know this is our first stitch. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And yes, that is 15. It's just leaning, but yes, that is the 15th. So we are doing this correctly. Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. So again, we're going to chain up 2. We're going to do one more round of double crochet, except we're going to work it in the back loop only because there are a couple projects on my page on my channel that work in the back loops, and you should also know how to work in the back loops, okay? I don't mean to point at you. I'm pointing at y'all, my bad. So let's chain two. Let's chain two our turning chain of chain two. We're going to turn our work, okay? And now we're going to do double crochets in the back loop only for this whole row, okay? For the entire row, we're only working into the back loops. These are the back loops. These are the front loops. We're only working in the back loop. And what working in the back loop does is it pushes this forward and gives it a ribbed look. I'll show you exactly what that means, but working in that back loop pushes this loop forward. Gives it a super cool look that you'll want sometimes. So again, I've chained up two. I'm going into yarn over, of course, that's how we start a double crochet. And instead of me going under both of these loops, I'm only going into the back loop. See that back loop? I'm going to pull up the yarn per norm. Everything else is normal. I have 3 loops on my hook. The only difference is that I'm only in this back loop. I'm going to yarn over, go through 2 loops, yarn over, go through 2 loops. I'm going to mark this. Always mark, if you get confused on your chain and your stitch, mark the stitch that's closest to the loop, which is right here. And making sure you're under both. Lock it up. And let us continue with the back loop. So we're going to yarn over, go into the back loop here, pull this working yarn up, yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2. Okay, let's continue. Yarn over, going into that back loop, pull the working yarn up, yarn over, 2, yarn over, 2. Let us continue working into the back loop all the way across. Okay, I'm coming up on my last stitch of this row. I'm going to take out this stitch marker and I'm going to crochet into the back loop of this last stitch, which is right here. Pull up this loop, yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2. You have just done 15 double crochets into the back loop. And as you can see, what crocheting into the back loop does is it creates this pushed forward ridge, which is super cute when you're making like beanies and you want to add some texture. Working in the back loops is super cool. Okay, so this is what your work should look like. Similar. If you're brand new, it may look a little wonky, but that's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. Okay. The last stitch I'm going to show you for now is a slip stitch. And I wanted to show you a slip stitch on, even though it's a very tiny stitch, I wanted to show it to you on a swatch that already had stitches because it's much easier. So what we're going to do is, again, we're only going to chain 1 to turn. We're going to turn our work. Okay, so for a slip stitch, you do not yarn over at all. We're going to go right into this space here, this first space where we're working with here. We're going to pull this through. With a single crochet, you yarn over, go through both. With a slip stitch, you're just going to pull this all the way through. I'm not going to use any stitch markers because this is the last row we're doing. So again, we're not yarning over. We're going directly under those 2 loops, pull it up, and pull it all the way through. We're not yarning over. We're going directly under the stitch, bringing up this yarn, not yarning over, going directly into that, through the loop. Under, pull up, go through. Make yourself little songs to help you. Under, pull up, go through. E, under, pull up, go through 8E. You can be goofy. I'm almost 50 years old. I can be whatever, however goofy I want to be. Okay, listen, we're going to take this stitch marker out, and we have one more stitch to slip into. Boom. Look, of course, it's going to go in because it's such a small stitch, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't still have 15 stitches. You should. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I was going to say, girl, you better teach in this tutorial. So this is your swatch. It should look like this. It's going to go in here because the slip stitch is so short and dense and it makes everything kind of tight. It's a good finishing stitch. It's also a good connecting stitch. So your swatch is not going to be perfectly square. It's not supposed to be. So if it's not, then it's correct. Okay. But it should be fairly neat because of course you are going to have to crochet on top of that. But let's measure this particular swatch that has a chain, 2 rows of single, 2 rows of half, a row of double crochet, a row of double crochet in the back loop only, and a row of slip stitches. Should be, if you use the 5.5 millimeter hook, should be, what's that? Let's turn this. Almost 2 3/4. Okay. Almost 2 3/4 tall, and then across, see, it's a little bit wonky right there, but that's okay. It should be about 4 3/4 across. Okay, that's how you know that you're crocheting at the gauge that the pattern requests. And I will get into swatches more in a minute. And then I want you to use those swatches as practice and as to gauge your work, because some people have a really tight or really loose tension, and you'll know if your tension is just super loose that you're probably going to have to go down a hook. If the pattern calls for a 5.5, you may have to use a 5.0. So I will teach you about swatches. Keep this swatch for reference because you might need it. So another thing I want to teach you is about fastening off. And all fastening off means, and you'll hear that in all the tutorials, it just means to cut. It means to cut your working yarn from the ball. You always want to make sure you cut a decent amount off because you're going to have to weave in your work, which we're going to do. Sometimes people will chain up one and then cut. I don't think it's necessary. If you cut a long enough piece off, you won't have to worry about your work falling apart. I cut the piece. I'm going to put my hook back in this loop, and I'm just going to pull that loop up. Okay, if you did it right, you should be locked and loaded. Okay, so now we have this swatch here, and we have these 2 tails. So I'm going to show you how to weave in your tails. So you're going to go ahead and take your tapestry needle, your yarn needle, whatever you have. I like using needles with a big eye for obvious reasons. For obvious reasons. I'm not trying to make my perimenopausal eyes work any more harder than they already are. Okay, go ahead and thread your needle. And this is what we're going to do. First, determine which is your back and your front of your work, okay? So I'm going to make this my back, okay? So whatever your back is, that's where you want to go ahead and weave in your work. And what I like to do is I like to go forwards and then back. So what you're doing is you're just going under loops. Going under loops that you find. You just don't want to go towards the front. So you want to go under loops, under as many loops as you think is necessary. You can go down, you can go back up. So after you've gone through a few loops, you're going to pull it through. Okay. You're going to pull that through. And then what I like to do is I like to go then back the way I just came. You can go back as long as you're not going back under here, it all comes apart. You can go back under this loop. You can go under this loop. You can go under this loop. Okay. So you don't have to do too many. I will tell you this, the sleeker the yarn, the more loops you want to go under, because then the more chances you have of your loops slipping out. But if you're working with a regular acrylic, cotton, yarn, polyester blend, you can go under about 5 or 6, maybe 3 or 4 stitches one way and 3 or 4 or 5 the next way. And then now you're locked in. I went that way. Now I'm coming back this way and I'm locked in. These stitches are not, there's no way this is coming out. So I'm going to cut the yarn close to the bottom without cutting my work, because then you will cry. Okay. And so now it's camouflaged in there. You can't see where it is. You cannot see at all. Okay. So we're going to do the same with this. Okay. Let me cut this. This one's a little too long. Okay. We're going to go ahead and thread our needle. I could have got one with an even bigger eye, but it's okay. Thread it, and then we're going to go under some loops in the back, go under some loops this way, pull this through, and then we'll go back this way under some other loops. Doesn't matter which ones you go through, just make it make sense. Okay, pull that through, and now you are locked. Let's go ahead and cut our yarn close, but not the project. And so now your ends are weaved in. This is not the sexiest swatch because of all the different stitches we use, but it doesn't matter. It's not supposed to be sexy. It's supposed to be functional. And we have weaved in our ends, and there you have your first swatch. For the next part of the tutorial, I will be showing you how to read swatches and gauges. It's very important that you know what your tension is before you start a project. You'll be needing your acrylic yarn, and you'll be needing your size H 5.0. You'll be needing a stitch marker, of course. You'll be needing your tape measure, and of course you always have your scissors around, because you're not a crocheter if you don't have scissors, okay? Whether you need them or not, you need them, okay? Just have them. It's just a part of the outfit. So anyway, the reason that swatches and gauges are very important is because if you purchased a pattern, or you're looking at a pattern and you want it to be exactly the way the picture says it should be, then you want to make sure that your tension is exactly the same as the designer's, which is, it's not impossible, but like we all crochet differently. So I just have an example here. This is not what we'll be making, but I want to show you 2 different ways you'll see swatches or gauges. This came off of some sparkle yarn that I had, some scrubby yarn, because I think like making your own scrubbies is super cute. And you can also make like face and body scrubbies. Let me know if you want me to do a tutorial on that. Anyways, most yarn labels have a pattern on the back. See, there's a pattern there. And then it'll have some will have knitting and crochet. Anyways, and then it'll show, of course, the picture of what you're going to be making. So this is not what we'll be making, but I just wanted to show you an example of how to read it on this label. So basically you're using this 4-weight yarn. This is for crochet. This is for knitting. Crocheters use hooks. Knitters use needles. People like to say crochet needles, and it burns my bridges because we are hookers. Okay? We are hookers. We're not needlers. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I love the knitting community as well. Bye bye. Okay, so this says that you'll be using medium 4 yarn. You'll be using a 5.5 I9 to make our swatch. This is for knitting, blah, blah. Okay, so what this means is that 14 single crochet across, which means you'll have to start off with a chain of 15 and then single crochet in the second chain from the hook in order to have 14 across. And then this says 13R, and this is your rows. So you need 14 single crochet across and 13 rows. And by the time you get done with that, your swatch, your square should be 4 by 4 inches. Okay, so that is what this means. This means if you go across, if you're using this, you go across 14 and then you do 13 rows, you should have a 4 by 4 inch swatch. If your swatch is off just a little bit, like, I mean, less than an eighth, then you're fine. Like it's going to be fine. If you're off by an inch, by even a half inch, depending on what you're making, then you might want to decide if you want to go up or down a hook. If you're making something like this, like a dish rag, it doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't matter unless it really doesn't matter if it's a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. Excuse me. But if you're making a hat, then it does matter, especially if it's too small. Because what are you going to do? I mean, you can block it, but if it's too small, it's too small. That's a lot of work to do. So some people find swatches tedious. I find them to be time savers in the long run. And I don't do swatches with every single thing that I make. But what you'll see more often in patterns that you purchase like online or like through Etsy, is you'll see it written out like this. It'll say something like 16 single crochet and 18 rows equals a 4 by 4 inch swatch. So you'll see that. Sometimes it'll just be written. Very few times have I seen it, the swatch and a diagram like you will see on labels. So it's good to understand what that means. So what that means is that you should have 16 single crochet going across and 18 rows. And by the end of that, your swatch should be 4 inches by 4 inches. And so we know that in order to get 16 single crochet, we need to chain up 17. So let us chain up 17. Of course, we start with our slip knot. You know how to do this. And we're going to chain up 17. All right, let me get some more yarn. After the 17, we are going to crochet into the second chain from the hook. This is the hook. This is the first chain. This is the second chain. We're going to crochet into here, our single crochet. So we know with our single crochet, we go directly into the stitch, pull up a loop so that we have 2, yarn over, go through 2. I'm going to go ahead and mark this stitch. And remember, when we mark our stitches, we go under both loops. So, okay, we're going to go across, crocheting 1 single crochet in each stitch across. All right, this is our last stitch. Perfect. What we're going to do, that is your first row. And for this, remember we need 18 rows. So now we're going to chain up 1, turn our work. And now we're going into the very first stitch to do a single crochet. I'm going to go ahead and mark this one as well. And now we're going to go and do single crochets all the way across. And you should only have 16 single crochet in each row. And this is your repeat pattern. You're going to single crochet 16 across. And then you're going to, when you get to the end of each row, you're going to chain 1, you're going to turn your work, and then you're going to do 16 across again. Just remember, you're only crocheting into that second chain from the hook on the very first row. Every row after that, you're going right into that first single crochet. All right, we're coming up on our last single crochet. We'll take the stitch marker out and we'll go right into this stitch here. Okay, so that is our repeat round. We've just done 2 rows of single crochet and we need 18. So I need you to go ahead and chain 1, turn your work, and do your 18 rows of single crochets going back and forth. And I will meet you at the end of our 18 rows. All right, we are coming up on the last 3 single crochets of our swatch. That's 2. I'm going to go ahead and take the stitch marker out so I can put my last single crochet in. And we are done with our swatch. Let me cut. Go ahead and cut. Fasten off. Pull your work through. And now this is what your swatch should look like, or something similar. This is your first time doing a swatch. Congratulations. It's not going to look perfect. Mine isn't perfect either. But this is a really good practice. And also, if you're going to be making things from my channel, it's good to kind of gauge your tension against mine. So we have done 16 single crochet across. We've done 18 rows. Let us count let's measure our swatch. It should be 4 inches, remember? So let's see. That's 4 inches. It's close. It's close. It's maybe off by 1/8. If I go down here where it's a little bit more wonky, then it's 4. And then we're going to measure this way. And this is like right on the money 4. So if your swatch turned out close to that, within 1/8 or so, then you are good to go. If it turned out much, much bigger, then you probably have you have a much looser tension than I do for now. And when you're beginning, sometimes your tension is it takes a while to get it together. So that's okay though. That's why swatches exist, so that you can go ahead and say, okay, maybe let me just go down. Let me go down a hook, or let me go up a hook. So that I can get the right gauge, so that my work turns out the way that it should be. Okay, let's talk about the magic ring or the magic circle. That tends to give people, I don't know, a little bit of a challenge initially, just because you have to do some finagling with your fingers. But once you get the hang of it, it's fine. And everyone does their magic circle different. So y'all saying, well, so and so does a blah, blah. Okay, well, here, this is how I do it. So how I do it is I wrap the yarn so that the short end is actually towards my nail. So I wrap it around, and then you see the long working piece is in front, closer to my wrist. And the shorter piece is closer to my nails. Okay? What I like to do is, you're going to be using your hook to pull up this working yarn, the one that's closest to your wrist. You're going to go under the short piece and pull it up. That's it. Literally, that's it. What gets people, tied up, or what's tricky, is now removing it off of your finger so that you can actually work. Because what you're going to have to do now is you're going to have to secure this with a chain. And then you can take it off of your fingers. Okay? And this is what a magic loop should look like. I'm going to do it again, don't worry. But this is your magic loop, right? And the reason we use magic loops is that sometimes we need to make circles, like especially when we're making like stuffies or people or anything where the center needs to be solid. A lot of times we'll use a magic ring, because if you see, if I pull on this, which you'll do, it completely closes the center. And of course, you'll have stitches in here, but it closes the center. And a lot of projects calls for you to use a magic ring. So let's do it again. Again, with the magic ring, I like to have the short end closest to my nail and the longer end closest to my wrist. Okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to take your hook. You're going under the short and you're going to pull up this long piece. Okay? If you don't want to do your chain right away, you can actually transfer this loop off and then transfer it back. Again, it's gonna take some finagling, and then you can do your chain one to kind of lock it in. It's how to see how I slipped out, but it's up to you. I usually transfer and then do but you have to hold it. I don't mind doing it again. You can fast forward this part if you have it already. Crochet prodigies out there. So we're gonna pull this up. If you want to try to chain while your fingers are still there, you can, but I don't know. I think you should take it off. I think you should go ahead and pull the yarn up, take it off, switch it back to the left, yarn over, and then make your chain. Usually this chain doesn't count as a stitch at all. It's just to kind of lock in your magic ring. Okay, now that we have our magic ring, we're going to be putting 10 single crochets inside of the magic ring. This chain does not count. How we work inside of a magic ring is we're going under the loop of the magic ring. We're going to pull up our working yarn, just like we would normally if we were working into a stitch. Now you have 2 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull through. Okay, that's 1. Let's mark it because, you know, marking is what we do around here. Okay, so again, working in the magic ring, you're going under the loop. You're going to pull up this working yarn so that now you have 2 loops on your hook, just like you would if you were working in a row. And you're going to yarn over and you're going to go through both. Now you have 2. We want 10 inside of the magic ring. What you want to make sure that you don't do, and you might because you're new, is sometimes when people are working in this magic ring, they don't go inside the ring. They end up they split this, they end up making single crochets halfway into here, halfway into there. If you do that, when you pull this at the end, it will not close. So this isn't something that, you know, you master the first time. It's awkward, but you'll get it. It's like anything else. We are human beings. Repetition is key. So under the loop, pull up the working yarn, wrap around, and we want to make 10. I have a couple of projects on my page where a magic ring is required, and so I wanted to make sure that with this tutorial, I gave you everything that you need to make all the videos previous of this one. Let's see how many single crochets we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We need 2 more. 1, 2. We now have 10 single crochet inside of the magic ring. I'm going to pull this up so it doesn't accidentally come loose, because then there's tears. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull the short end. When I pull the short end, this whole thing should close. And does. Okay, so now it's closed. Now you have a cute little ring. There's a little bit of space there, but I can close that. So that's what it should do. If your hole doesn't close, then, oh gosh, I'm so immature. If your hole doesn't close, then that probably means you weren't inside of the magic ring while you were doing your single crochets, in which case, take it loose and do it again. Okay? So what we're going to do now is, remember that slip stitch I taught you, and I told you it was a good connecting stitch because it is. We're going to slip stitch into that first single crochet. So how that looks, this is the chain that I told you we weren't counting. This is the single crochet. And how do I know? Because what's there? Marky mark. Yes. Slip stitch. We're going under this. I'm going to take the stitch marker out. And then we're going to pull this yarn all the way through. So now look, and you can tighten this at the end, like it'll tighten more. Look what you have now. You can make so many things with a magic ring. This is how you start off making most stuffies and most people, which I'll be making on my channel. So the magic ring is a really good skill to master if you want to be able to make a wide array of things. So that is your first round, because now we're working in rounds. These are rows back and forth. Now we're working in rounds. And when you're working in rounds, it's imperative that you use a stitch marker, especially if you're just working in continuous rounds. Some rounds go this way, and at the end, they go back this way, so it's a little easier to read. But stitch markers are key, okay? So now that we have slip stitch into the first single crochet, let's make sure we still have 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And do, okay. So this is what I want you to do. Each round, because these are rounds, I want you to chain 1. And I want you to do, in this next round, I want you to do 2 single crochet in each stitch around, working in the back loops only. Ooh, challenge. So the first stitch is going, remember, this is your front loop. This is your back loop. We're going into the back loop. Yarn over, go through 2. We're going right back into the same stitch. And we're going to round the yarn over, go through. Now you have 2 single crochets in the back loop. I'm going to go ahead and mark that first stitch, which was this one. And at the end of this round, you should have 20 single crochets in the back loops only. Let us continue. I'll do a couple more with you, and then I'll meet you at the end of this round. Here's the next. We're going into the back loop. We're going to put 2 single crochets in the back loop. Okay, we're going to do that all the way around. And I will meet you at your stitch marker. All right, we are coming up on our last stitch right before our stitch marker. We're going to put 2 our single crochet into that last stitch. Okay, we're at the end of our first round, and we should have 20 single crochets into the back loops only. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. As you can see, this is that chain 1. It does not count. Okay, it's just there so that we don't have gaps. You'll understand that later. But yes, you have 20. What we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch into the first. Yes, so now this is what your little circle should look like. Ow. Okay, what we're going to do now is you're going to chain 1, and then I want you to turn your work, because I want you to get used to turning your work and working in the back as well. So what we're going to do in this round is we're not working in the back loops only, we're working under both loops. So in this round, we're working under both loops, and we're going to work like this. We're going to do 1 single crochet in the first, and we're going to do 2 in the second. That is a repeat round. Let me mark this first stitch. So this was the first, and this is 2 in the same stitch. That's the repeat round for this round. You're going to do 1 single crochet, and you're going to do 2 in the next. 1, and then 2 in the next. Do that all the way around, and I'll meet you at the end of this round. All right, I'm coming up on our last 2 stitches. The first stitch should be a 1 single crochet. In the last stitch, we should have 2 single crochet. You should have 30 stitches. If you did it correctly, you'll have 30. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch into that first stitch again. All right, this is what our circle should look like, and it should be wavy because you have a lot of stitches in these spaces. In each stitch, in order to flatten it out, then we have to do less stitches. Whenever you do 2 stitches in 1 stitch, it's called an increase because you're increasing, you're making it bigger. And so we're increasing. We're going to do 1 more increase round, and then we're going to do 2 regular rounds, and then you'll have like a little coaster. Okay, so we have slip stitched. We're going to chain 1, turn your work, and this is how we're going to work. We're going to do, it's a little tight. We're going to do 1 single crochet in the first stitch. We're going to mark it. You know how to mark our stitches. We're going to do a single crochet in the second stitch, and into the third stitch, we're going to increase. And that just means we're going to put 2 single crochet in that. An increase could be 2, 3, 4. It's just whatever the pattern calls for, but it's at least 2 because you're increasing. And you're increasing slowly so that it turns out correctly. So again, we're doing 1 single crochet. Into the next, we're doing another single crochet. And into the third stitch, we're doing 2 single crochet. And that is your repeat round. You'll do 1 stitch, stitch in the next, and then increase into every third stitch. And I will meet you at the end of this round. All right, let's come to the end of this round. We have a single, and then a double. And this round you should have 40. So count, make sure you have 40. And the last 2 rounds, we're only doing 1 single crochet in each stitch around. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slip stitch into the top of that first single crochet. Okay, I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and then in that first stitch, I'm going to put a single crochet in, and I'm going to mark it. And then I'm going to do 1 single crochet all the way around. You will still have 40 crochet at the end of this round. At the end of this round, you should go ahead and slip stitch into your first single crochet, and then you should chain 1, turn your work, and do another 40 single crochet, and then that will be the end of your project. And we will look at your work and we'll look at my work and we'll see how you did. So I will meet you at the end of both of your single crochet rounds. We're not increasing anymore. So for the next 2 rounds, you should only have 40 single crochet. I will meet you back at the end of these 2 rounds. Okay, look, we're coming up to the end of our 2 rounds of just single crochet. That was the last one. I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch, into the first single crochet. And we're going to go ahead and cut our work. Remember when we fasten off, which is a term you'll hear often, you want to leave a little bit of a tail. You don't want to be, it doesn't have to be obnoxious, but you don't want it too small, too short rather, because you want to have enough to weave in so that your work doesn't come apart. So just cut your end, it's just a 3-4 inches, and pull your hook out. And this is what you should have. Okay, I'm going to pull that short end. That'll close up your loop in the middle. I'm going to cut this just a little bit so it's not sticking out in my tutorial. But this is what your work should look like, right? You did the magic ring. I know you did the magic ring. I know you did, right? And then you put 10 single crochets in, and then you increased by putting 2 single crochets in the back loop, because you know what the back loop is, so you use that skill. And then you increased for 2 more rounds, and then you did 2 rounds of single crochets, and now you know what you have. Whatever you want, you can put a post on this and make this an earring. Or let me see, y'all. Hold on, don't go nowhere. Da-na-na, da-na, mm-mm, mm-mm, da-na-na-na-na. Oh, who made a coaster? You did. Look, who made a coaster? You did. Right? You could probably even go a couple more. Well, you know what? If you could do another round, maybe 2 before your work starts to cave in because you don't have enough. But like, you totally just made a coaster, right? Let's measure it. Let's measure yours against mine just for fun. Let's see how many inches this goes across. So this looks like almost 3.5. It's very close to 3.5 inches. I want to know how many inches yours ended up being. And if you have nailed down your magic ring or your magic circle yet. Thank you so much for joining me in this long tutorial. I hope that you got some great things out of it. And I also hope that this is a tutorial that you can come back to over and over again whenever you need to either refresh your skills or learn a new skill. Now that you have all the skills you need to make anything on my channel, try something out. And also, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in my next tutorial. Thanks again, and God bless.